Today's topic is how populations evolve. We're going to learn about evolution. And the first slide is just an example of DDT and malaria. You all know malaria is a disease caused by mosquito bite, and it could lead to fatality. That means people might die if not treated properly. And in the early 1950s, World Health Organization, they came up with this DDT a chemical which was used to kill mosquitoes and thereby eradicate malaria, and DDT was found to be very effective. So people started using it all over Africa and Asia. People were using it indiscriminately. However, in later years, it was found that mosquitoes became resistant to DDT. How does that happen? So before we go into the details of evolution, let's understand this example. So if you imagine before, pre-DDT, this was the mosquito population, all the mosquitoes, let's say, in a country in Africa. So you see the green and the reds, right? This is showing a chromosome inside the mosquito and the genes, a specific gene. Now most of the mosquitoes have this green gene, and because of this green gene, the mosquitoes die when DDT is applied on them. However, by chance, okay, it's a chance factor, 1 or 2 mosquitoes had a mutant version of this green gene. Okay, now they have the red gene. This red gene, because of the presence of this red gene, these mosquitoes are resistant to DDT. That means DDT does not kill them. Now before we applied DDT, of course we didn't know that these mosquitoes were resistant. However, when DDT was found, invented, and then DDT was applied on most of these mosquitoes, all these mosquitoes with the green gene, they died. Now which are the mosquitoes that remained? The ones with the red gene. But did we know before? Did the scientific community or people know before? No, we didn't know, right? So now these 2 mosquitoes have survived. And now what's going to happen is these now apparently, because so many mosquitoes have died, people thought, oh, the mosquitoes are gone, right? So because the mosquitoes are gone, we are not getting malaria. So the incidence of malaria cases, they went down. So for a few years, it was like DDT has worked. We have successfully, we have eradicated malaria. But what happened over the years, only these 2 mosquitoes that survived, they reproduced. And now they reproduced and survived even better. Why? Because they didn't have competition. More resources, less mosquitoes. Earlier, they were competing against this. So kind of these green genes were competing with the red genes. So these mosquitoes were competing with these and keeping them under check. But now these 2 mosquitoes had all the resources to themselves, and so they survived. And then when they survived, they don't have green gene. What's the gene that they have? The red gene. What is the red gene doing? Making them resistant to DDT. So now when you apply DDT on them, are these mosquitoes gonna die? No, they're not gonna die. They're resistant. So now we have created a population of mosquitoes that are resistant, and so DDT was found to not work anymore. Okay, so DDT was of no use. So that was just an example. Keep that in mind, because now in the future slides, when we learn about the factors that cause evolution, we will go back to that. Now coming to some definitions here, what is taxonomy? Because this is part of, taxonomy is a branch of biology where we identify, we classify a new organism, species, name them and all. Now what is the system of naming? When you come across a totally new organism, a new plant or animal, how do you name it? We name it following this particular Linnaean system, which was named after this particular scientist, Carl Linnaeus, who's known as the father of taxonomy. Who's the father of genetics? Anybody remembers?
Mendel.
Huh?
Mendel.
Good job. Mendel is the father of genetics. So who's the father of taxonomy? Carl Linnaeus, okay? And he gave a binomial nomenclature system. Means every organism would have at least 2 names, just like we have first name and last name. So similarly, they have binomial nomenclature. So the first name is always the name of the genus, okay, and the second name would be species. For example, what is the scientific name for human beings for us?
Homo
Everybody
sapiens.
knows?
Homo sapiens.
Homo sapiens. How do we write it? There's a particular way of writing it. You just cannot write HOMO like this and then, no, this is incorrect way of writing Homo sapiens. The only way to write a scientific name is, that is the first word, which is the genus, would start with a capital letter, Homo, and then the next one would always start with a small letter. This is sapiens. So this is genus, This is species. Okay? So genus and species, and we always underline these two terms. So when you're typing, this is for handwritten, and when you're typing, you either underline it or you italicize it. If you do not underline or italicize, it is not a scientific name, and it's not written in this way, okay? And especially for us human beings, we are Homo sapiens sapiens. This is the subspecies. So, but you don't have to worry about the subspecies. You don't just remember genus and species. This is how a scientific name is written. And this is a classification, for example. And why do we need this scientific name? This is to maintain uniformity, because every country in the world, we have, they have different languages. So, we might be using a particular name to identify an organism. Somebody in Russia might be using a different name. Somebody in China might be calling it by a different name. So how do scientists all over the world, when they want to convey something, so then instead of using the local common name, we use scientific name, so there's no confusion. And no two different organisms can have the same scientific name. So for example, when you go to leopard for scientific purposes, the scientific name is Panthera pardus. Okay, the lion would be Panthera leo. Okay, the tiger would be Panthera tigris. So that means you see, Panthera is the common genus, and the species is getting different: Leo, Pardus, Tigris, and so on. And this is how it goes. We are not going into the details of the classification in this lecture. So it starts with kingdom Animalia, which would include all the animals. Then particular, a group within this, another group within this, another group within this. And we have these different names: phylum, class, order, family, and so on. This is how we classify. Now, how did species, this idea of a species, does anybody know what is a species? What's the definition of a species? I mentioned this, or I discussed this in the first lecture, because that's where I go into the different levels of organization. Yes, Willow?
An animal that can sexually reproduce offspring, and it's, what's the word? Like, there's nothing else like it. Like, a dog is one, a cat is one.
Yes, species, for example, human beings are a species,
Yeah.
a dog is a species, a cat is a species. So a species is defined as a group of individuals or organisms that have the ability to interbreed with each other and produce fertile offsprings. So the offsprings are fertile, means they can also reproduce. So this reproduction can go on. So that is a word that you just learned, is species. Now another word is population. What is meant by population?
How many there are?
How many? How many there are? So what's the difference between population and species? No?
Population is like a number of species, like 10.
So which one is bigger, species
Population.
or population?
Species. Is a population localized or regionalized?
Yes. Yes. So population is a smaller group within species. So that means population would be member of the same species who are at the same place at the same time. Right? So we are a population of Joshua Tree residents, let's say, here. So we are here in the same place at the same time. So for example, a classroom in Australia right now, we are the same species as them. They are also human beings. We are also human beings, Homo sapiens with the same species, but we are not the same population as them. Why? They are in a different place at a different time. Right? So they are a population, ours is a different population. However, if one of those students from Australia comes here, joins us here in this class, next week and sits here, then he's part of this population. And of course, we were always the same species. Clear? Makes sense? So that is population. So now how does this thought process start? Long time ago, before science came, Aristotle, all of you have heard of his name, the very famous philosopher. So as I said, before science came, they generally held, those philosophers at that time, they had the belief that species were a fixed concept. That means it was more coming from Genesis, right? So theological, religious beliefs that each species or each form of life was being created exactly how they existed today. That means, okay, dogs were created like dogs from the beginning. There you go. You're the dog species, you're the cat species, you're the human species, you're the tiger species, and so on. So this was more religious thought. So in the in the 1600s, people thought, or those time, the scholars thought that the Earth was only 6,000 years old. Now we know Earth is 4.6 billion years old. Okay, forget about thousands and millions. So there were some naturalists, scientists, who saw, the idea that all living things just existed the way that we see them now from the very beginning. It was somehow kind of not really tallying with what they were seeing, okay? They were grappling with the interpretation of fossils that were being found every now and then all over the world, right? They were coming with imprints. They saw or remains of organisms that lived in the past. And they were like, okay, so where are these now? Where have they gone? Why are they not here? So the first kind of scientific thought on this, like important, of course there were many minor thoughts, came from a French scientist called Lamarck, okay, 1800s. So Lamarck came up with the hypothesis that evolution is a refinement of traits. What does that mean? Traits, you've learned in Mendelism, traits is a character, right? So a refinement means improvement of qualities, improvement of characteristics is going on. So he said that by using or not using the body parts, an individual may develop certain traits that the individual is able to pass on to the next generation. What does that mean? He gave the classic example of giraffe's neck. Okay, you've seen giraffes, the long necks that they have. So he proposed hypothesis that giraffes have these long necks because they used it more and more and more. So as they used it more, the neck got longer and longer and longer, and that's why over generations the neck has become so long. So that was his hypothesis. What do you guys think? Nadia says no. Okay, what else? Who else says no? Most people, why? Luke goes, okay, Melissa? So that means if I use my right hand a lot, which I am a right-handed person, will my right hand get longer? But it does get a little bit stronger than my left hand, right? Because I am right-handed, I'm using it. However, giraffe's neck, it was not really not too scientific. So people in future, they didn't call Lamarck as the father of evolution. So then comes this most important person in the history of evolutionary biology, father of evolution, Charles Darwin. Okay, Charles Darwin, he began, he started on a ship from Europe, and he was moving all on the along the coastline of South America. Very young, 22. This was the name of the ship. And he gave the theory of evolution. His book was published in 1859. This book is called The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. This is the basis, the foundation of evolutionary theory. So now you guys know who's the father of genetics? Mendel. Who's the father of evolution? Charles Darwin. Right? You cannot afford to forget these two names. Very, very important. Now what did Darwin say? Now first of all, you see Darwin's journey started from here. You see all these red arrows all around South America and here in Australia. So this was his journey. Now there's always some similarities in good scientists. What was something really good about Mendel was a very clear and detailed record keeping. Whatever he saw, data should tell you the answer to your questions, give you the answer to your questions. So very, very efficient, systematic, organized, detailed record keeping, and then the ability, the smartness to interpret those results, okay, to draw conclusions from the results. So Charles Darwin did the same, okay, very meticulous, detailed journals of his observations. As he was exploring, he had a natural curiosity, so he was exploring, and he was collecting thousands of fossil specimens. Whatever he saw, he was like, oh, this looks interesting. And he was keeping them and then carefully studying them while he was on the ship. And one of his first observations was that, you see the term, geographic proximity is a better predictor of relationships among organisms than similarity of environment. What does that mean? That means when he was, let's say, in South America, so let's say he's at a place where there's a mountain and then the valley. So that the environment, okay, at the top of the mountain is very different from the environment in the valley. The top of the mountain will be very cold, ice covered. The valley was warm, okay, green. So the environment is very different, and yet the flora and the fauna, that means the plants and the animals that he saw in the valley as well as the top of the mountains, were more similar when he compared similar environments across different continents. That means the animals and plants in South Africa were more similar to each other than the animals and plants when he compared those of South America to Europe. So if he takes, let's say he takes a mountain like Alps, okay, Switzerland, mountains, just like mountains in South America, Andes. So top of Alps, Andes mountain, similar kind of environment, snow, ice, very cold. However, the plants and the animals look very different. So the plants and the animals in South America were, even though they were cold or warm, climate in two places in South America, they were still very similar to each other. They resembled each other. So it was like, okay, that means the more closely located animals and plants are, geographical proximity, close geographical location is a better indicator of how similar their structures would be, how similar they would be anatomically, physiologically as compared to animals and plants in other parts. So one of the most important places that he studied was are called the Galapagos Islands. They are a group of islands. Have you heard of this name, Galapagos? One of the most expensive places to visit, tourist attraction. Has been on my bucket list for a long time, but it's too expensive, right? So Galapagos Islands, and he found some very different kind of species there that he did not find anywhere else. Okay, so still they were similar to the most similarity that you could find was between the Galapagos Islands and in South America. So the marine iguanas in Galapagos Islands had flattened tails instead of what you find in other iguanas, which help in swimming and are similar to, but still look a little bit different from the land-dwelling iguanas which he saw on South American mainland. So okay, iguanas at both places, but you see the tail looks different. Okay. And then each island in this Galapagos Islands had its own distinct variety of giant tortoise. So these are very famous from the Galapagos Islands. You know how old they are?
Hundreds.
Hundreds of years, right? So these tortoises have been here way before us. So at that time, while Darwin was moving, he was greatly influenced by the finding of a scientist who was not a biologist, but a geologist. Do you know what's geology? What's the geologist? Anyone?
Study of rocks.
Study of rocks, earth, layers. If you go to a Grand Canyon, you see those different layers, right? So this particular scientist called Lyell, he was presenting the case that the earth did not exist as experts believed those times. No, he said, no, the earth was not like this from the very beginning. The earth is constantly being changed. The earth changed over hundreds and thousands of years, okay? So he said, he used the word sculpted. What do we mean by sculpted? It's because earth is being modified by the action of water and wind. And that is why, if you ever go to Grand Canyon, that's the closest place. That's why I keep giving this example. Go there and see it, the layers of rocks. So you know the erosion caused by the Colorado River, how it caused the layers. So Darwin was very much influenced. He said, yeah, so if natural elements, wind, water, if they can sculpt the earth, okay, if earth changed because of this, that means living organisms also probably were exposed, they also experienced the same kind of forces, natural forces, and we also evolved. We also changed. We were now not the same as we see us these days. So he hypothesized that present day species are the descendants of ancient ancestors. And our ancient ancestors, although we do resemble them in some ways, we are not exactly identical to our ancestors. Okay, we have evolved. So over time, our small mutations, differences, he called them differences, accumulated. We now know it's mutations, right? Evolution occurs by mutations. So mutations accumulated and gave rise to present day forms. How many of you think we are still evolving? Do you know if human beings are evolving? What are the changes? Yes, Luke?
I can't give many specific examples.
No specific, anybody knows any? Yes, Villa?
I think it was something like either some people are having one bone less in their pinky toe or one less bone in their pinky. I don't really remember. Something like that.
Okay, I'll check
It
that
was a
one.
while ago.
Sarah, do you want to add something?
I did not have an example.
Okay, some of the known cases are our jawbones. See, so early man ate, when they started hunting, they ate a lot of raw flesh, raw meat, right? So canines and others, and this jawbone was much wider to accommodate that food. With modern men, because we cook our food, so it is much easier to chew and digest. So our jaw bones are slowly getting smaller, and that is why present day human beings have this need to take out the wisdom teeth. Most of us nowadays, our jaws do not have the space to accommodate all the 32 teeth, right? Is there anybody who has had their wisdom teeth extracted? Yes, because most of the times our jaws do not have the space. So that's one of the mutations that's accumulating. Okay, so his understanding or his kind of hypothesis nowadays it's termed as descent with modification. That means as we descend, we evolve, we change. So Darwin proposed scientific mechanism. He was giving evidence. Okay, he had collected evidence, mechanism for how life evolves, and he said individuals with some traits, okay, they are more likely to survive and reproduce. Okay, so those are evolutionary adaptations. While Darwin was saying this, in another part of the world, in Indonesia, in those days there was no internet, they couldn't have communicated, right? So another British naturalist called Wallace was conceiving a hypothesis very identical to Darwin's. Now let's try to understand what happened with the giraffe's necks. Okay, how did the giraffe's necks become so long? According to Lamarck, the giraffe's necks became long because the giraffes used it more. But as per Darwin, the giraffe's necks became long not because they used it more, but the reason is, he proposed, as per his hypothesis, there were giraffes, they had, let's say, a normal sized neck, right? And they were reaching out and eating leaves from trees. Now, a few of the giraffes had random mutations and had a little bit longer neck. So which was little bit longer. Now the giraffes that had a little bit longer neck, they had an evolutionary advantage. What was the advantage? What is the advantage if the giraffes had they were taller?
They could eat food from taller trees.
They could reach the leaves at higher heights, right? The shorter giraffes, the ones who didn't have those long necks, they had a less advantage. So imagine, let's say there was a drought. The trees, the leaves turned brown. So the giraffes with the longer necks could eat leaves from the shorter trees as well as the high up trees. So they got more food. When they got more food, they had a higher chance of survival. The giraffes with the shorter necks died. Simple. Died, but too weak to reproduce. So that the giraffes with longer necks survived and were strong enough to reproduce. So they produced offsprings. So their offsprings, they inherited the mutation from the parent giraffes. So they also got longer necks. And then two giraffes with longer necks mated, they produced the next generation. The next generation again had longer necks. Some more mutations, neck got longer. Those who got longer had again survival advantage. Slowly, over hundreds of years, over thousands of years, the giraffes with the longer necks outlived and out-evolved the ones with the shorter necks. Got it? So you see the difference in how Lamarck and Darwin are explaining the same thing. So for Lamarck, it was only using it more. But Darwin says, no, it was random. It was, some giraffes just got a random mutation. They got a longer neck. And because they got a longer neck, so they got an evolutionary advantage. More food. More food means more health, better health. Better health means stronger. Stronger means stronger, get good survival and reproduction. So now look at fossils. What are fossils? Fossils or imprints, those are things that lived in the past. So these are some examples. For example, this is a sedimentary fossil formed by minerals replacing there's a particular national park I've been to that one, I cannot remember the name, in Arizona. Does anyone remember the sedimented?
Petrified forest.
Petrified forest, right. Petrified forest. There you see a lot of these, wood where the living material has been replaced by minerals and it looks beautiful, right? So that is considered a fossil. Now this one is very fascinating. A 45 million year old insect got embedded. You see this mosquito? Have you seen Jurassic Park, the first one, original? How did they make the dinosaur? What did they show in the movie?
They took out DNA from mosquitoes.
From a mosquito. The mosquito had sucked the blood of the dinosaur and the mosquito got preserved, so that's a fossil. And then because they got the blood of the dinosaur from the mosquito, so